Lesson 8.1, Video 2. Factor and solve using the zero product property. So we are looking for zeros. And those zeros are considered solutions. So zero product property has you factor first. So we have a trinomial on the left side of this equation. Now before we could just factor because there's no equal sign. But when we have an equal sign, now we can solve. So the left side is normal. We would factor it as we have been practicing. X term first. We're looking for two numbers that have a product of a negative 35 and a sum of 2. Factors of 35 that come to mind are 7 and 5. We have to have a negative 35 when we multiply them, so one of them has to be negative. And when we put them together, we need a positive 2. So we'll make the 5 negative. So now we can say that it's x plus 7 and x minus 5. Now before we would be done, but because it's an equation, we're going to use the zero product property, which states that I have two things being multiplied. When you multiply them, you get 0 as an answer, so one of them must have been 0. And whatever makes one of them 0 is considered a solution to the equation. So a handy way to do this is to take each one and set it equal to 0. And by each one I mean each parentheses. And solve each one. And you get the number that would make each parenthesis become a 0. If you look closely, they're the opposite of what's in there. So for this example, the solutions, or in other words, the zeros, are negative 7 and 5. So if I plug those in there, I would get 0 times anything. I would get 0 as an answer, or even 0 times 0 and get 0 as an answer. The second one, we have a little bit more work in the factoring end of it, but still the same. We're looking for two numbers that have a product of 18 and a sum of negative 9. Now we need to, we're going to factor this by grouping and not guess and check to practice that process. So we have 18 times 1, 6 times 3, 9 times 2. The one that adds up to 9 would be 6 and 3. So we would rewrite this as 2x squared minus 6x minus 3x, because remember we have to have a negative 9, so both these are negative. They still give you a positive 18. Factor by grouping. They both have a 2 and an x in common. We divide both pieces by 2x and we get x minus 3. There's a negative here, so I'm going to factor out a negative 3, and that gives us a positive x minus 3. If we did it right, we have the same thing in parentheses. They both have an x minus 3, so I put that out front and I multiply it by what's left, which is 2x minus 3 equals 0. Now, we factored it, but what are the zeros? Again, very handy to write each one, each factor, each thing that's in parentheses, and set it equal to 0, and solve each one. Now the first one is done pretty quickly, and again notice that your answer is the opposite of what is in the parentheses. The second one takes 2 steps. So I have to divide by 2 in this case, and we get x equals 3 halves. Now that doesn't seem like it's the opposite of what's in there, but it is a negative 3 in the parentheses. You have a positive 3 in the numerator, and the denominator is what the coefficient is of x. just an observation for future reference. But these two are considered the zeros. And this ends Lesson 8.1, Video 2.